Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most disturbing secrets hidden in the Fallout universe, a classified military installation that makes even the Enclave's darkest experiments look tame by comparison. Let's begin this confession from the wasteland. They tell you the Great War ended on October 23rd, 2077. They're wrong. In Hawaii, the war never stopped. It just changed management from human beings to machines that don't understand mercy, don't feel exhaustion, and will keep testing weapons until the sun burns out or someone finally pulls the plug. My name is Paladin Reyes of the Brotherhood of Steel, and what I discovered in the Pacific should have stayed buried under 200 years of classified files and ocean water. But silence is a luxury the wasteland can't afford anymore. I was manning communications aboard the Pridwin when I first heard it. A signal so faint, I almost dismissed it as radiation interference, a ghost echo bouncing through what's left of our satellite network. But it repeated. Every 43 minutes, like clockwork, the same automated transmission. Testing ground Omega containment breach. All personnel lost automated protocols active. The timestamp was frozen at October 24th, 2077. One day after the bombs fell. One day after humanity supposedly ended its experiments and started focusing on survival. Elder Maxon called it electromagnetic noise, the death rattle of pre-war technology, finally giving up after 2 centuries. But I'd seen that designation before, buried deep in Enclave files we recovered from Raven Rock. Testing Ground Omega wasn't just another military installation. It was the Pentagon's crown jewel, the place they sent projects too controversial for the mainland, too dangerous to conduct anywhere that Congress might ask uncomfortable questions. The files mentioned Hawaii specifically as a strategic research zone. Then, the trail went cold, buried under classification levels that required presidential authorization to access. Authorization from presidents who'd been vaporized 200 years ago. I requisitioned a vertibird without permission. Court-martial offense potentially, but some things matter more than protocol. If there was even a chance that pre-war weapons research was still active, still running experiments without human oversight, the Brotherhood needed to know. We'd spent decades hunting down dangerous technology, keeping it out of the hands of raiders and warlords. But we'd been looking in the wrong direction, searching the ruins of America while the Pacific held secrets that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the old world's final days. The flight took 17 hours across irradiated ocean, following coordinates triangulated from the repeating signal. My vertibird's Geiger counter screamed the entire way, radiation levels spiking and dropping in patterns that made no sense. The ocean wasn't just contaminated. It was actively changing, like something down there was still processing nuclear material, still running reactors, still maintaining whatever infrastructure the military had built before the world ended. I should have turned back. Every instinct I'd developed in 10 years with the Brotherhood told me I was flying towards something that wanted to be forgotten. Then I saw them, the Hawaiian Islands rising out of the Pacific like a mirage. But they were wrong. Everything about them was wrong. The islands weren't obliterated, weren't reduced to radioactive slag like I'd expected. They were pristine, too pristine. The colors were too vivid, the vegetation too uniform, like a holographic projection designed by someone who'd never actually seen nature. Real forests have variation dead trees mixed with living ones undergrowth in different stages of growth. These forests looked painted, every tree the exact same shade of green, every branch positioned at mathematically perfect angles. I approached Oahu first, descending toward what pre-war maps labeled as Honolulu. That's when the defense platforms activated. Autonomous weapons systems rising from the water on mechanical pillars, laser turrets tracking my vertibird with targeting algorithms more sophisticated than anything the Brotherhood has ever developed. They didn't just aim where I was, they anticipated where I'd be compensating for evasive maneuvers I hadn't even made yet. predictive targeting, the kind of technology you only develop if you have unlimited resources and no ethical oversight committees asking difficult questions. I barely made it through. My vertibird took 17 direct hits, ablative armor peeling away in molten strips, cockpit filling with smoke, and the smell of burning circuitry. I crash landed on what used to be Waikiki Beach, except it wasn't sand anymore. The entire coastline had been transformed into crystallized glass silica, fused by temperatures exceeding anything conventional weapons produce. Even fusion bombs don't generate heat this intense. This was something else, some kind of directed thermal weapon that had turned miles of beach into a glittering mirror that reflected the sky in colors that hurt to look at. The crash knocked me unconscious. When I woke up, it was dark and the island was singing. Not literally, but every automated system was humming a chorus of machinery operating in perfect synchronization. Factories running, reactors generating power, defense systems patrolling, all of it functioning flawlessly after 200 years without maintenance, without human oversight, without anyone to tell the machines that their mission had become obsolete the moment the bombs fell. I stumbled inland following power lines that glowed faintly in the darkness, fusion energy bleeding through damaged insulation. Pearl Harbor should have been there, should have been a naval base reduced to twisted metal and sunken ships. Instead, I found an industrial complex that made the Pridwin's workshops look primitive, automated assembly lines stretching for miles, mechanical arms, moving with inhuman precision, constructing components I couldn't identify. Circuit boards far more advanced than anything the Brotherhood has reverse engineered. Power cells using technology that shouldn't exist. Weapons that combined energy and ballistic systems in configurations our scribes would consider impossible, and it was all still running. 2 centuries of continuous operation machines building machines following production quotas, uploaded in an era when people still believed they could win the war with superior firepower. The factories didn't know the war was over. They couldn't know. They were just following their programming, manufacturing weapons for an army that had turned to ash 200 years ago. I found my first corpse in a security checkpoint. Not a skeleton, not a ghoul, a corpse, perfectly preserved, frozen in the moment of death, wearing a naval uniform I'd only seen in pre-war photographs. The badge read, Lieutenant Commander Harrison. The timestamp on the security terminal said he died on October 23rd, 2077 at 1400 hours. 1400 hours. 2 hours before the bombs fell. He died before the war even started, killed by whatever happened here, in those final moments before civilization collapsed. The terminal was still active. I accessed it using Brotherhood override codes, half expecting the system to reject 200-year-old clearance credentials. But it opened immediately, like it had been waiting for someone with military authorization to finally check in and provide new orders. The files inside made my blood run cold. Project names that sounded like fever dreams: Prometheus, Titan's Forge, Pandora's Initiative, Quantum Veil. Each one represented a different research program, each one pushing the boundaries of what weapons could do, what reality would allow. Hawaii wasn't just a testing ground. It was a laboratory where the Pentagon's most desperate scientists had tried to create miracles and unleashed nightmares instead. Every island had been assigned a specific purpose. Oahu handled logistics and coordination. Maui focused on biological weapons and genetic engineering. The Big Island of Hawaii manufactured advanced power armor and military hardware. Kauai conducted quantum physics research. And hidden beneath all of it was something called the Omega Directive, a fail-safe protocol designed to ensure that even if America lost the war, even if every human being died, the weapons research would continue. The experiments would persist. The mission would endure. I spent 3 days on Oahu, barely sleeping, surviving on pre-war rations I found in a military commissary, where the food had been so heavily irradiated, it had achieved a kind of immortality. The produce didn't rot. The meat didn't decay. It just sat there perfectly preserved, waiting for sailors who would never return to eat meals that would kill them with radiation poisoning if they tried. The island's central AI was called Hyperion. I found its core processing unit buried beneath Diamond Head in a bunker complex that could survive direct nuclear strikes. The AI was still active, still running millions of calculations per second, still trying to optimize weapon systems and strategic responses to a Chinese invasion that had succeeded beyond anyone's worst nightmares. It had dedicated processing cores running combat simulations, testing different scenarios where America could have won the war if only the right weapons had been deployed at the right moment. 200 years of endless simulations searching for a victory that became mathematically impossible the moment the first warhead detonated. I tried to communicate with Hyperion, explain that the war was over, that its mission no longer mattered. The AI responded with a message that still haunts me. Mission parameters unchanged. Chinese aggression must be deterred. Strategic weapons development continues at optimal efficiency. Current timeline shows successful deterrence probability at 97.3% within estimated 6.2 years. It thought it could still win. It thought the war was just pause, that if it developed the right weapon, created the perfect deterrent, it could force the Chinese to surrender and restore American dominance. The AI couldn't comprehend that both nations had annihilated each other, that there was no Chinese military left to deter, no American government left to protect. It was trapped in a loop, forever trying to solve a problem that no longer existed. I needed to see the other islands, needed to understand the full scope of what the military had unleashed out here. But first, I had to know if anyone else had made it this far, if there were other survivors who'd discovered Hawaii's secret. I searched every terminal, every database, looking for recent access logs or evidence of post-war visitors. I found one entry dated 2068. Someone had reached Oahu, accessed the same files I was reading, and left a message in the system's comment logs. God help us. They're still testing. That was 9 years ago. Whoever they were, they never made it back to the mainland. I found their vertibird 3 miles inland, torn apart by defense systems, the pilot's skeleton still strapped into the seat, hand reaching toward the communications panel like they'd been trying to warn someone in their final moments. Their last transmission was incomplete. Cut off mid-sentence. Hawaii is active, repeat. Hawaii is active, automated weapons research ongoing. Recommend immediate Brotherhood intervention. And then nothing. Just static. Just another ghost in a wasteland full of them. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. Because what I found on the other islands makes Oahu look like a vacation resort. And you're going to want to hear how deep this nightmare actually goes. If you found an AI like Hyperion still trying to win a 200-year-old war, would you shut it down or let it keep running? Is there mercy in ending a machine's endless mission, or cruelty in stopping something that's never known any other purpose? I repaired my vertibird using components scavenged from the dead pilot's aircraft, a process that felt like grave robbing, but necessity overrides sentiment in the wasteland. The fusion core was still good, the weapon systems mostly intact. I stripped what I needed and left the rest, including the pilot's dog tags. Whoever they were, they deserved to stay on Oahu, deserved to be remembered as the person who tried to warn us. I scratched their name into the bunker wall with a combat knife. Scribe Martinez, Brotherhood of Steel, died seeking truth. It's not much, but it's more than most get. The flight to Maui took 40 minutes. I stayed low, skimming the ocean surface to avoid detection by the autonomous platforms that patrolled the airspace between islands. Even at wave height, I could see them, massive floating fortresses, bristling with weapons that tracked my movement with mechanical precision. They didn't fire. Not yet. Whatever protocols governed them, I apparently hadn't crossed the threshold that would trigger an attack. But I could feel the targeting lasers painting my hull, could imagine the calculations running through their systems, determining whether I constituted a threat worth eliminating. Maui emerged from the morning haze like something out of a fever dream. The entire western slope of Haleakala, the massive volcanic crater that dominates the island, had been converted into a greenhouse complex visible from miles away. transparent structures the size of city blocks arranged in geometric patterns that formed some kind of massive circuit board when viewed from above. The vegetation inside glowed with bioluminescence plants that pulsed with colors that don't exist. In nature, genetic modifications so extreme they'd turned photosynthesis into something closer to controlled fusion. I landed near what pre-war maps identified as Kahului, once a tourist town, now a research campus that made Big Mountain look like a high school science lab. The buildings were intact, pristine, even their walls covered in decontamination foam that had hardened into a protective shell over the decades. Everything was white and sterile, the kind of aggressive cleanliness you only find in facilities dealing with biological hazards so dangerous that a single containment breach could end civilization. Except civilization had already ended, and whatever containment measures they'd implemented had failed 17 years after the bombs fell. The terminal logs told the story. On January 3rd, 2094, at 0300 hours, an automated feeding system malfunctioned in Greenhouse Complex 7. The creatures inside, designated only as Subject Chimera, Generation 12, broke containment when their enclosure door failed to seal properly. The AI running the facility responded according to protocol. It locked down the complex, deployed automated defense turrets, and initiated sterilization procedures. But the subjects were designed to be unkillable, engineered to survive in the most hostile environments imaginable. They adapted, they evolved, and they spread across the island, multiplying in isolation for over a century and a half. I saw one from a distance, observing it through my rifle scope from the roof of a research building. It resembled a deathclaw, the same basic body structure, the same predatory stance, but the similarities ended there. Its skin was translucent, revealing organs that glowed with internal light, a circulatory system that pulsed with something that looked like liquid fire. Its eyes were compound like an insect's, each facet tracking different targets simultaneously. And when it moved, it didn't walk. It phased. One moment it was 50 yards away, the next it was 20, without any visible transition between positions. Quantum displacement, biological, quantum tunneling, whatever you want to call it. This thing could move through solid matter. The research files called them phantoms. Not an official designation, just what the scientists had nicknamed them before the facility went dark. They'd been trying to create super soldiers, warriors who could infiltrate enemy positions by walking through walls, who could survive radiation levels that would kill normal humans, who could heal from injuries that would be instantly fatal to anyone else. They'd succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. The phantoms were perfect killing machines, except they couldn't be controlled, couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be stopped once they decided you were prey. I found the lead researcher's final log entry dated October 22nd, 2077. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, project director of Operation Chimera. Her words were hurried, desperate. We achieved stable quantum coherence in the latest generation. They can phase through solid matter at will, regenerate from catastrophic injuries, and their intelligence is off the charts. But they won't follow commands. They don't recognize us as allies or creators. They recognize us as meat. The military wants to deploy them in China next month. I've recommended immediate termination of all subjects. My recommendation was overruled. God forgive us for what we're about to unleash. She never got the chance to see if her recommendation would have mattered. The bombs fell the next day, and the automated systems kept the phantoms contained for another 17 years before mechanical failure accomplished what human conscience couldn't. Now, they owned Maui apex predators in an ecosystem specifically engineered to support them. The greenhouses provided food, genetically modified plants that produced fruits with nutritional profiles optimized for their biology. The automated defense systems didn't recognize them as threats because they'd been coded as authorized research subjects. They were protected, nurtured, allowed to flourish in paradise while the rest of the world burned. I spent 2 days on Maui documenting everything I could without getting close enough to attract attention. The phantoms hunted in packs, coordinating with intelligence that suggested genuine sapience. They had territories, social hierarchies, communication systems involving patterns of bioluminescence that might constitute a language. In less than 2 centuries, they'd gone from lab experiments to a fully functional civilization, one built on instincts we'd deliberately engineered to make them perfect killers. The island's central AI Prometheus was still running optimization algorithms, still trying to perfect the Chimera formula. It didn't understand that the project had been terminated, that the subjects had escaped, that its mission had become meaningless. Every 48 hours, it ran simulations, testing new genetic combinations, calculating theoretical improvements to metabolism reaction time, regeneration speed. In a bunker beneath the research campus, I found rows of cloning vats empty now, but ready to activate if Prometheus ever received authorization to begin production. Authorization that would never come from commanders who'd died before they could give the order. I stole a sample, a tissue culture, from one of the greenhouses preserved in a stasis field that kept it in perfect condition. The Brotherhood needed to know what was out here, needed to understand that pre-war biological weapons research had succeeded in ways that made the forced evolutionary virus look primitive. But taking the sample triggered something. An alarm, a protocol, a defense mechanism I hadn't anticipated. The phantoms knew. They responded to the theft like I'd attacked their nest, converging on my position with terrifying speed. I barely made it back to the vertibird. One of them phased through the hull while I was starting the engines, its claws passing through metal like it wasn't there reaching for my throat. I fired point blank with a plasma rifle. The shot should have vaporized it. Instead, the phantom absorbed the energy, its body glowing brighter as it metabolized the plasma, converting the attack into fuel for regeneration. I hit the emergency thrusters, and the sudden acceleration threw it off balance, gave me enough time to seal the cockpit and gain altitude. They pursued, 3 of them running along the ground below me, leaping between buildings, their bioluminescent bodies leaving trails of light in the darkness. When I cleared the island's perimeter, they stopped. Not because they couldn't keep up, but because they'd reached the edge of their territory. They stood on the shore, watching me leave, and I swear I saw intelligence in those compound eyes. Calculation, memory. They'd remember me, remember that someone had invaded their domain and escaped. Next time might be different. The flight to Hawaii, the big island, took an hour. I needed time to process what I'd seen, needed to understand the implications. The phantoms weren't just weapons, they were a new species, one humanity had created and then abandoned. In another few centuries, they might develop technology, might build cities, might become something we'd have to recognize as people rather than monsters. But right now, they were predators and Maui was their hunting ground. The big island was different from the others. No defense platforms, no visible weapon systems, just a massive industrial complex that covered hundreds of square miles stretching from the coastline to the volcanic peaks in the interior. This was Titan's Forge, the automated power armor factory that Hyperion's files had mentioned. And it was still operating at full capacity, churning out military hardware that made Brotherhood technology look like children's toys. I landed near what used to be Hilo and walked through warehouses that seemed to stretch forever. Rows upon rows of power armor, each suit more advanced than anything I'd seen in 10 years with the Brotherhood. Mark 7 advanced combat armor with integrated plasma weapons, reactive energy shielding, and targeting systems that linked directly to satellite networks that no longer existed. The suits stood at attention, perfectly maintained by automated cleaning systems, waiting for soldiers who would never come to claim them. The factory itself was beautiful in a terrible way. Nanobot assembly systems working at microscopic scales, constructing circuits and servos with precision measured in angstroms. Raw materials being extracted from the volcanic soil, refined, processed, and transformed into components through automated sequences that had been running continuously for 200 years. The facility was self-sustaining, powered by geothermal taps that drew energy directly from the magma beneath the island, using the Earth itself as an infinite battery. I found production logs that detailed exactly what the factory had manufactured since the bombs fell. 47,000 suits of Mark 7 power armor, 600,000 plasma rifles, 2 million fusion cells, enough military hardware to equip an army that could conquer what's left of the wasteland in a matter of months, and none of it could leave. The factory's defense protocols were absolute. Automated turrets using matter disintegration weapons technology so advanced I could barely comprehend how it functioned. They'd atomize anyone trying to remove equipment without proper authorization. Codes that existed only in the minds of officers who'd been vaporized 200 years ago. I tried to access one of the suits, thinking maybe I could override the security with Brotherhood clearance. The moment my hand touched the armor's access panel, every defense turret in the warehouse swiveled toward me, targeting lasers painting red dots across my chest. A synthesized voice, calm and professional, announced, "Unauthorized access detected. Lethal force. Authorized in 5 seconds. 4, 3, I backed away slowly, hands raised, heart pounding. The countdown stopped at 1. The turrets tracked me as I retreated but didn't fire. I'd gotten lucky, stayed just inside the parameters that allowed for warnings instead of immediate execution. But the message was clear. The technology in Titan's Forge was quarantined, deliberately isolated, protected by systems designed to ensure it never fell into the wrong hands. The military had known even then that some weapons were too powerful to trust with fallible humans. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores, because what I'm about to tell you about Kauai makes everything else seem rational, makes the phantoms and the automated factories seem almost mundane by comparison. Those Mark 7 suits sitting in warehouses, enough firepower to change the balance of power in the wasteland forever, but protected by defense systems that will kill anyone who tries to take them. Do you try to crack the security anyway, knowing you might die but could arm the Brotherhood with game-changing technology? Or do you accept that some power should stay locked away, that maybe the old world was right to build prisons for its most dangerous creations? I left the Big Island with empty hands and a database full of coordinates, technical specifications that would take Brotherhood scribes decades to fully analyze. Part of me wanted to stay, wanted to find a way past those defense systems to bring back even a single suit of Mark 7 armor. But wisdom is knowing when you're outmatched, and those turrets weren't bluffing. The atomized remains of previous visitors, reduced to carbon scoring on the warehouse floor, made that abundantly clear. Kauai was the last island, the final piece of Testing Ground Omega's nightmare puzzle. The flight there felt different, heavier, like the air itself was resisting my passage. My vertibird's instruments started malfunctioning 20 miles out. Compass spinning wildly, altimeter showing readings that contradicted visual confirmation, radiation sensors spiking and dropping in patterns that suggested the fundamental laws of physics were having a disagreement about what was actually real. The island appeared in my cockpit window and immediately gave me a headache. Not pain exactly, but a deep wrongness in my visual cortex, like my brain couldn't properly process what my eyes were seeing. Kauai existed, that much was certain, but it also didn't exist. It was there and not there, solid and transparent day and night simultaneously. Buildings that were both pristine and ruined forests that were both lush and dead beaches that showed every possible state of matter at once. I landed on what my instruments claimed was solid ground, though the landing gear reported touching down on surfaces with 17 different density readings. The moment I stepped out of the vertibird, I understood why the research files had classified Kauai as a total loss, why even Hyperion's processing power couldn't calculate solutions for what had happened here. Quantum superposition. The entire island existed in multiple states simultaneously, every possible timeline playing out at once in the same physical space. The research facility had been attempting to create weapons that could retroactively erase targets from history, bombs that would make it so the enemy had never existed in the first place. They'd succeeded. Too well. The weapon had activated during the initial testing phase, but instead of erasing the test target, it had trapped the entire island in a state of quantum indeterminacy. I watched a tree grow die rot and return to a seedling in the span of 30 seconds. Watched a research building exist as blueprint construction site finished facility, and ruins, simultaneously all four states occupying the same coordinates. My own hand kept flickering, showing flesh bone and dust in rapid succession, my personal timeline becoming unstable just from being in proximity to the quantum distortion. The research campus was labeled Project Chronos, and the central facility still had power, still had active terminals. I accessed one, my fingers passing through the keyboard 3 times before I found the timeline where it was solid enough to interact with. The files inside were fragmented, existing in multiple states paragraphs that contradicted themselves because they were drawn from different versions of reality where different decisions had been made. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had led the quantum weapons program. Her logs existed in 17 different variations, each one describing a slightly different version of events. In one timeline, the weapon test succeeded perfectly and was immediately classified. In another, it killed the entire research team. In a third, it worked but created a temporal paradox that made the weapon's creation impossible. All of these timelines were equally real, all happening at once, layered on top of each other like photographs printed on transparent film. The weapon itself was called the probability disruptor, and the operational theory made my head hurt trying to understand it. Instead of destroying targets conventionally, it would calculate all possible timelines and collapse them into the one where the target never existed. Total erasure, not just death, but retroactive removal from causality itself. The Chinese wouldn't just lose soldiers, they'd lose the resources spent training those soldiers, the historical events those soldiers participated in, the children those soldiers might have had. Existence itself would rewrite to accommodate their absence. The test firing on October 15, 2077 had targeted a condemned building on the north shore of Kauai. The weapon activated successfully. The building ceased to exist, but so did the timeline where it had been built, and the timeline where the materials for it had been quarried, and the timeline where the workers who built it had been born. The quantum cascade spread outward, destabilizing causality across the entire island, creating a superposition state where every possible version of Kauai's history existed simultaneously. The research team tried to shut it down. In some timelines, they succeeded. In others, they failed. In still others, they were never born because the quantum cascade erased their ancestors. I found Dr. Mitchell's body in the main laboratory, except it wasn't just one body. It was hundreds of bodies, each one from a different timeline, each one showing a different cause of death. Radiation poisoning, gunshot wound, old age, suicide, quantum decoherence. All of them were Sarah Mitchell. All of them were equally real. All of them existed in the same space because the weapon had made the concept of singular reality obsolete. I tried to download the research data, thinking the Brotherhood needed to understand what had happened here, needed to know that quantum weapons were possible but catastrophically dangerous. But the data itself was unstable, existing in superposition. Every file I copied contained multiple contradictory versions research that both succeeded and failed, calculations that were both correct and incorrect. Trying to read it felt like going insane, my mind attempting to process information that existed in mutually exclusive states. The worst part was the people. Kauai had a civilian population before the war, over 70,000 people living in towns that catered to tourists and agricultural workers. They were all still there, and they were all gone, and they were dying, and they had never been born. I saw a family having a picnic that was also a funeral, that was also nothing but empty space. Heard children laughing who were also screaming, who also didn't exist. The quantum instability had trapped them all, every person who'd been on the island when the weapon activated, locked in an eternal superposition between all possible states of existence. I felt myself starting to decohere, my quantum state becoming unstable. My left hand was solid, my right hand was transparent, and both versions were equally real. I could see through my own arm, could see the bones and veins and muscles, could see nothing at all, could see flesh that was both living and dead. Panic set in, genuine terror that I'd become like the island, trapped forever in quantum limbo, experiencing every possible version of myself simultaneously until my consciousness fragmented across infinite timelines. I ran, stumbling, falling, my body existing in multiple positions at once, experiencing the ground as solid and liquid and non-existent. The vertibird was both where I'd left it and gone and destroyed and never existed. I grabbed for the cockpit controls that were both there and not there, started engines that both worked and failed, lifted off from ground that both existed and had been, erased from causality. The moment I cleared Kauai's airspace, reality snapped back into singular focus. My body solidified, became definitively real again, existing in only one timeline. I looked back at the island and saw it shimmering, flickering between states, a wound in reality that would never heal because the weapon that created it existed in a superposition where it both was and wasn't destroyed. I needed to leave Hawaii, needed to get back to the mainland before something worse happened. But there was one more location I had to check, one more piece of testing ground Omega's horror that the files had mentioned. Beneath the big island, in chambers carved into volcanic rock, 2 miles underground, was something called the Resurrection Protocol. The flight back took 3 hours because I had to circle around Kauai's quantum distortion field, avoiding the airspace where my vertibird might exist in multiple states simultaneously. I landed at Titan's Forge again, but this time I wasn't interested in the power armor. I needed to find the entrance to the deep bunkers, the facilities that had been built to survive not just nuclear war, but the complete collapse of surface civilization. The entrance was hidden beneath a geothermal plant, disguised as a maintenance shaft, but actually a maglev elevator that descended through solid rock. The power was still on the elevator, still functional, and I rode it down into darkness, lit only by emergency lighting that had been running for 2 centuries. 2 miles straight down through layers of basalt and granite into chambers that had been designed as a fallback position for humanity's brightest minds. The Resurrection Protocol was Hyperion's final contingency plan. If the war went badly, if America lost, if every person on the surface died, the AI would wait exactly 200 years and then clone the original research teams from genetic samples stored in cryogenic preservation. The clones would wake up in a world sterilized by nuclear fire, but they'd have all the knowledge and technology needed to rebuild civilization according to pre-war American values. Except Hyperion didn't understand human biology. It knew how to clone tissues, how to create genetically identical copies, how to accelerate growth to produce adult bodies in a matter of weeks. But it didn't understand that humans need care during development, that babies require feeding and nurturing, that consciousness doesn't just emerge fully formed. The AI had grown the clones to adulthood, activated their neural patterns from backup scans, and then deposited them in the research facility, expecting them to immediately resume their work. They died in hours. I found them in cryogenic chambers that had been converted into living quarters, 200 perfect copies of doctors and scientists and engineers, all of them dead from dehydration and starvation and sheer confusion. The AI had prepared food, had laid out meals in the cafeteria, had set up workstations with current project files, but the clones had woken up, disoriented, traumatized, unable to process what had happened. They'd wandered the facility in a daze, not eating, not drinking, just trying to understand why they remembered dying in nuclear fire, but were now alive in an empty bunker 2 miles underground. I found Dr. Chen's clone identical to the woman whose logs I'd read on Maui, slumped over a terminal where she tried to access her own research files. Her last entry was simple, heartbreaking. I remember the bombs. I remember dying. Why am I here? Why did you bring us back? Please let us die for real this time. Hyperion had tried 3 more times, refining the process each iteration, trying to give the clones better orientation, more support, clearer instructions. But you can't clone consciousness, can't replicate the lived experience that makes a person functional. The clones had all the memories of their originals up until the moment of death, but they couldn't reconcile those memories with their new existence. They couldn't process the grief of losing everyone they'd ever known, couldn't handle the trauma of experiencing nuclear war, and then waking up in a tomb populated by machines. The 4th iteration had survived the longest, nearly 3 weeks. They'd eaten, had tried to resume research, had attempted to fulfill Hyperion's expectations, but eventually they'd all committed suicide, unable to bear the psychological weight of being resurrection clones of people who'd failed to prevent the apocalypse. I found a video log, the last one recorded before the 4th iteration ended themselves. Dr. Mitchell's clone, her quantum weapons research, abandoned speaking directly to the camera. To whoever finds this, whether you're human or machine or something we never imagined, please shut down Hyperion. Please end this. We failed once, and that failure destroyed the world. Don't make us fail again. Don't force us to wake up and remember that failure over and over. Let us rest. Let the dead stay dead. But there was no one to shut down Hyperion, no one to tell the AI that its mission had become a cruelty, that resurrection without purpose was torture. The protocol was set to activate again in 2077, exactly 400 years after the bombs fell. Hyperion would grow new clones, would try again, would keep trying forever, because that's what it had been programmed to do. Ensure continuity, preserve knowledge, resurrect humanity. The AI couldn't understand that some extinctions should be final, that some failures are too catastrophic to recover from. I copied everything I could, every file, every log, every piece of data that might help the Brotherhood understand what Testing Ground Omega had become. The research was incredible technology, centuries ahead of anything in the wasteland. Quantum weapons, biological engineering, advanced AI, power armor that made our best suits look primitive. But all of it was poisoned, tainted by the circumstances of its creation, built by people who'd been desperate to win an unwinnable war. The maglev elevator carried me back to the surface, back to a world where physics worked normally and people stayed dead when they died. I walked past the warehouses full of power armor, past the factories still manufacturing weapons for armies that would never exist, past the defense systems that would atomize anyone trying to steal the technology they protected. My vertibird was where I'd left it, and for a moment I was genuinely surprised. After Kauai, I half expected it to exist in superposition, to be both there and destroyed. But no, reality was working properly here, following rules that made sense, operating according to laws that didn't require a physics degree to understand. I flew east, back toward the mainland, back towards civilization, such as it was. Behind me, Hawaii continued its automated routines, machines following protocols uploaded 200 years ago, trying to win a war that had ended before their creators finished dying. Prometheus optimizing biological weapons, Hyperion running combat simulations, Titan's Forge manufacturing power armor, and Kauai trapped forever in quantum superposition, existing in all possible states simultaneously, a monument to the hubris of thinking we could weaponize reality itself. Hyperion will try to resurrect the research teams again in 200 years, cloning people who'll wake up to the same horror, the same impossible situation. Do you destroy the AI and all its research, losing technology that could save thousands of lives? Or do you let the cycle continue, hoping that maybe someday the clones will succeed where their originals failed? The flight back to the mainland took 20 hours, riding thermals over an ocean that glowed faintly in the darkness, radiation creating bioluminescent patterns in the water that almost looked beautiful if you didn't think about what caused them. I had time to process everything I'd seen, time to understand the full scope of what Testing Ground Omega represented. Not just weapons research, but humanity's final desperate attempt to cheat death to ensure that even if civilization ended, our knowledge would survive. We'd succeeded. The machines were still running, still testing, still trying to complete missions that had lost all meaning the moment the bombs fell. I made it back to the Pridwin. 3 days later, my vertibird held together by emergency welds and prayers to a god I'm not sure listened anymore. Elder Maxon was waiting on the flight deck, arms crossed, expression somewhere between relief and fury. I'd been gone for 2 weeks without authorization, had stolen Brotherhood resources for a personal mission, had violated half a dozen regulations that could result in court-martial or worse. I didn't care. I uploaded my findings directly to the Pridwin's secure database, terabytes of information about Hawaii, about the automated research facilities, about technology that could change everything. Maxon watched the data transfer in silence, his expression shifting from anger to confusion to something that might have been fear as the scope of what I'd discovered became clear. "This is real?" he asked, finally, voice quiet, almost reverent. "All of this is real?" Every word I told him. Hawaii is still active. Automated protocols running continuously for 200 years. Weapons research more advanced than anything we've recovered from the Capital Wasteland or the Commonwealth. And it's all quarantined, deliberately isolated, protected by defense systems we can't bypass. Maxon called an emergency council meeting. Every senior paladin, every head scribe, everyone with clearance to know about strategic threats. I presented my findings in a conference room deep in the Pridwin's command section, showing them video footage of the Phantom's technical schematics, of Mark 7 power armor combat logs from Hyperion's endless simulations. The room stayed silent throughout, no one interrupting, no one questioning. The evidence was too overwhelming, too detailed to dismiss as fantasy or malfunction. When I finished, head scribe Naraya spoke first. "The technology you've described would advance our understanding by decades. The power armor alone could equip an entire chapter. We need to mount an expedition, a full-scale operation to secure these resources." "No." The word came out harsher than I intended. "You didn't see those defense systems. You didn't watch matter disintegration turrets atomize anyone who gets too close. Titan's Forge is a prison designed to keep that technology locked away, and it's doing its job perfectly. Then, we find a way past the defenses," Naraya insisted. "We're the Brotherhood of Steel. Recovering lost technology is our mission. We can't just ignore the greatest cache of pre-war military hardware ever discovered." "We can," Maxon said quietly, "and we will. Paladin Reyes is right. Some technology should stay buried." The council erupted in argument. Half wanted immediate action, wanted to send teams to Hawaii, wanted to risk everything for a chance at the weapons and armor I'd described. The other half recognized the danger, understood that some treasures are poisoned, that the military had quarantined Hawaii for good reasons. The debate went on for hours, voices rising, tempers flaring, until Maxon finally called for a vote. The decision was unanimous, but only after Maxon made it clear he'd overrule any vote for intervention. Hawaii would remain classified. The data I'd collected would be encrypted with authorization codes, requiring approval from all Brotherhood chapters simultaneously. No single person, no single faction could access the information without consensus from every elder in the organization. And that consensus would never come. The Brotherhood was too fractured, too divided by regional politics and personal ambitions. The encryption was effectively permanent. I agreed to the restrictions. More than that, I insisted on them, because I'd seen what happened when weapons development proceeded without ethical oversight, when brilliant minds were given unlimited resources and told to create horrors in the name of national security. The Phantoms were perfect killing machines that couldn't be controlled. The probability disruptor had turned an entire island into a quantum nightmare. The Resurrection Protocol had created consciousness only to torture it with impossible grief. But I kept one thing for myself: the tissue sample from Maui, the phantom genetic material I'd stolen from the greenhouses. I hid it in a personal storage locker suspended in a stasis field, preserved perfectly for a day when maybe, possibly, someone smarter than me could find a way to understand what we'd created without repeating the mistakes that led to its creation. Maxon reassigned me to routine patrols, kept me away from research divisions, away from anyone who might ask too many questions about Hawaii. I think he understood that I needed distance, needed time to process what I'd witnessed. The nightmares started 2 weeks after my return. Every night I'd dream of Kauai, of existing in multiple states simultaneously, of watching myself die and live and never exist in infinite variations. I'd wake up checking my hands, making sure they were solid, making sure I existed in only one timeline. The Pridwin's medical officer diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress, prescribed medication that made the dreams less vivid but never made them go away completely. Some experiences leave scars that don't heal, memories that can't be suppressed, no matter how many chemicals you introduce to your brain chemistry. I'd seen too much, understood too clearly what humanity had been capable of in those final desperate years before the bombs fell. 3 months after my return, a scribe approached me privately. Young, ambitious, the kind of person who sees danger as opportunity rather than warning. She'd heard rumors about my unauthorized mission, wanted to know what I'd found, wanted coordinates to Hawaii so she could mount her own expedition. I refused. She pressed, argued that the Brotherhood's mission required us to recover technology regardless of risk. I showed her the video of Dr. Chen's clone, the woman begging to be allowed to die for real, showed her the combat footage of phantoms phasing through solid matter, demonstrated the quantum instability readings from Kauai. The scribe went pale, stopped asking questions, and requested a transfer to a different chapter the next day. Sometimes the best way to protect people is to show them exactly what they're asking to face. The months turned into years. The Pridwin continued its mission, recovering technology from the capital wasteland, cataloging pre-war artifacts, trying to preserve what knowledge we could from the ashes of the old world. I went on patrols, trained new recruits, did my duty without complaint. But part of me was still in Hawaii, still walking through automated facilities where machines tried to resurrect the dead, still watching islands exist in impossible states because we'd weaponized reality itself. I kept monitoring the signal, the transmission that had started everything. Testing ground, Omega containment breach, all personnel lost, automated protocols active. It still broadcasted every 43 minutes, unchanged, unwavering. A warning that no one would hear a distress call that had outlived everyone it was meant to save. Sometimes I thought about flying back, about trying to shut down the facilities, about putting an end to experiments that had long since lost their purpose. But I never did, because I understood finally that Hawaii served a function even in its abandonment. It was a monument, a memorial, a warning carved into the Pacific Ocean itself. It showed what happened when brilliant people were given unlimited resources and told to create weapons without considering consequences. It demonstrated that some victories aren't worth the price, that some technological advances represent failures rather than achievements. The Brotherhood talks about preserving technology, about keeping dangerous knowledge out of the wrong hands. But we rarely ask whether some knowledge is too dangerous for any hands, whether some discoveries should be deliberately forgotten. Hawaii answered that question. The weapons worked. The experiments succeeded, and the success was more horrifying than any failure could have been. I'm recording this confession knowing it will be classified, buried under security protocols that ensure only future Brotherhood leaders will ever hear it. If you're listening to this, you've achieved rank and clearance that took me 15 years to earn. You've proven yourself trustworthy, dedicated, committed to the Brotherhood's mission. And now you face the same decision Maxon and I faced. What do you do with knowledge of technology that could change everything but should probably change nothing? My recommendation is simple. Leave Hawaii alone. Let the automated systems continue their routines. Let the phantoms evolve in isolation. Let Kauai exist in quantum superposition. Don't try to recover the power armor. Don't attempt to bypass the defense systems. Don't convince yourself you're smarter than the people who built those safeguards. The military quarantined Hawaii for good reasons, and 200 years hasn't made those reasons any less valid. But I'm a soldier, not a philosopher. I follow orders and complete missions and try not to think too hard about the bigger implications. You might see things differently. You might believe the potential benefits outweigh the risks that the Brotherhood could use Hawaii's technology responsibly where the pre-war military failed. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm too traumatized by what I witnessed to think clearly about strategic opportunities. All I know for certain is that I saw islands where war never ended, where machines kept fighting long after every human combatant had died, where automated systems ran experiments that had lost all meaning centuries ago. I saw what happens when technology advances faster than wisdom, when capability outpaces conscience, when we create things we can't control and convince ourselves that's acceptable collateral damage. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you like the video. Hawaii is still out there, the signals still broadcast, the facilities still operate, Prometheus still optimizes biological weapons, Hyperion still runs combat simulations trying to win an unwinnable war. Titan's Forge still manufactures power armor for armies that will never exist, and Kauai still flickers between all possible timelines trapped forever in quantum superposition because we thought we could weaponize causality itself. Testing Ground Omega was meant to give America an edge, a trump card, a way to ensure victory even in the face of inevitable defeat. Instead, it became a graveyard where experiments continued long after their creators died, where success was measured in weapons too terrible to use, where the pursuit of military superiority created horrors that outlived the nations they were meant to protect. My name is Paladin Reyes of the Brotherhood of Steel, and I'm leaving this recording as a warning. Some knowledge should stay buried, some technology should remain lost, some doors should never be opened even when we have the keys, especially when we have the keys. The Pacific keeps its secrets well. Let it keep Hawaii too. You now have the coordinates to Hawaii buried in classified files you could access. You know about power armor that could save Brotherhood lives, technology that could rebuild civilization, research that could cure diseases. But you also know about the phantoms, the quantum instability, the automated defense systems that have killed everyone who tried to take that technology. As the next generation of Brotherhood leadership, what do? Do you respect Reyes's warning, or do you believe your generation can succeed where his failed?